The meaning of sin is to break God's law, and God's law is summarized in the 10 Commandments. The first commandment is only worship God. So this would mean that unbelief is a sin because you're not worshiping God if you don't believe in Him. And also self-worship is not worshiping God because the reason we don't worship ourselves is because we are sinners, but God is perfect. The second commandment is don't commit idolatry. So this means don't just make a golden calf and then worship it. But also idolatry stems to making something that you own a god. The next commandment is do not misuse God's name, because if you misuse God's name, that is blasphemy. So that's why it's wrong to use God's name as a curse word. And I also think that using God for arguments in a bad way, like how do you think God would feel, would also count as blasphemy because you are misusing God's name. The next commandment is remember the Sabbath. So skipping church without a valid reason, like being sick, is breaking the fourth commandment. And also not resting on the Sabbath will count as breaking this commandment. Here's why. Because the Sabbath is the day of rest and the day God rested. So if we would care about making time for God, we would get our work done on the other 6 days of the week. The first commandment is to honor and respect your parents. So even if your parents have problems, you still have to obey them because we're all sinners. And God has given us earthly authorities like parents and the government and teachers. Yes, these people are imperfect in many ways and sin often, but you still gotta respect them because they're above you in authority. The sixth commandment is don't murder. So don't just think you haven't done it, because according to Jesus, anytime you hate someone, that counts as murder, because when those feelings taken to extreme, that would lead to murder. So wrath is also murder. This would also mean that suicide is a form of murder. This could also mean that treachery is also a form of murder. The seventh commandment is don't commit adultery. So again, don't think you haven't committed this one, because Jesus says whenever you look at someone with lustful intent, that counts as committing adultery. So lust is breaking the seventh commandment. Jesus also says that divorce is breaking the seventh commandment because it violates the covenant of marriage. So this also means that fornication or sex outside of marriage is wrong. This would also mean that pornography is wrong because you're supposed to save your sexual desires after marriage, not before marriage. So this would also mean that homosexuality is breaking the seventh commandment. The eighth commandment is don't steal. So this would apply to actual thievery, which you're actually stealing something. This also means that scams is breaking the eighth commandment. And in history, gossip has also been seen as breaking the eighth commandment, because in gossip, you steal someone's name for your own benefit, and that is basically what stealing is. The ninth commandment is to not lie, because if you lie about what someone else did, that's basically as bad as if you did it yourself. And lying about your deeds is also bad. Now, some people are gonna say, like, what if you have to lie to save your or someone else's life? But first of all, it's probably never gonna happen, and Jesus said to focus on the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. The 10th commandment is do not covet. So obviously envy is a sin because coveting also means envy. But there's another meaning to this commandment, which is don't want to sin, because in the root of every action that is a sin is a desire that is a sin. and we should control our minds. And even if you still have sinful desire but don't do sinful action, it's not solving the problem. That means you have good self-control. It doesn't mean you have a good heart. Are you feeling guilty? That's good. That shows the law is for that. So it will expose our sin and we will trust more in Jesus. Luckily, Christianity isn't about following a bunch of rules. It's about having faith in Christ and preaching the gospel. So turn to Christ now and remember that you are essential, not accidental.